All right, welcome to explainED. We have Michelle Ament here today. See, I got it right. Michelle, we usually start our podcast by asking our guests to tell us a little bit about their journey and also what AI means to them.
Okay, so where do I start with what AI means to me, or where I started my journey?
I'd start with the journey.
Okay, so a little bit about me. I have been an educator for close to 30 years. So I started my career as an elementary classroom teacher and moved into roles in leadership in districts. But when I think about my kind of journey with technology and the use of AI, I think back to when I was in the classroom a good 15 years ago, and we were in a one-to-one situation, and I was always about how do we use technology to create? And I saw so much consumption happening with the Sage on the Stage focus, teacher delivering content. And I thought, oh my gosh, technology is the way, the lever to change us from that consumption to that creation. And so I started using technology with students in a creation way. What's disappointing to me over the years is that we still struggle to try to use technology for creation. And so now here we are in this moment where our biggest shift in technology is happening. And that same fear for me is coming up about the use of AI. And so I really think about AI from how can I use it to amplify and elevate my human intelligence rather than replace my human intelligence. So same kind of idea of creation versus consumption. And so I think when I think about AI, that's really where I'm really focused on is how do we really understand these tools and have it be less about efficiency and more about really maximizing who we are as humans.
So you mentioned it, and I want to unpack this, but tell us more about the human intelligence movement and how you got there. What is going on? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the Human Intelligence Movement is a grassroots nonprofit organization. And Travis Allen and I started this movement. We're the co-presidents almost like 18 months ago. And we just started to see the rise of people talking about AI and knew that we needed to come with a message that really counterbalanced. We're not against AI. We're not afraid of AI. We use AI all day. But it was really about how do we create a narrative and awareness around keeping humans at the center. And so we formed this organization, and it quickly took off with educators and leaders and industry innovators because of the message centered on human intelligence. So our focus is around generating awareness for this, building a community of people that can share best practices, help solve the wicked problems in education, and really advocate for reclaiming humanity. And how do we advocate for policy change? How do we advocate for humans at the center in design of products? How do we balance out the focus on technology development with human development? And we could talk a lot about a lot of stats, but there is a lot of money and energy poured into the development of big tech, and we are underrepresented in the development of humans, whether it's in our K-12 system, whether it's in our workforce. There's a strong need to really think about how do we make sure humanity continues to thrive in this AI world.
Michelle, can you tell us about you've identified some human intelligences that AI can't replicate. Can you tell us how you landed on the domains that you did?
Well, I would credit all of that to our research team for sure. So a group of researchers came together and studied multiple previous bodies of research and information to determine that we would define human intelligence as social emotional competencies, as cognitive competencies, and adaptability competencies. And I think that that probably doesn't come to much surprise to you that we would talk about social, emotional, and cognitive. So that's that EQ and IQ. And that's been pretty common as we think about human intelligences. But I would argue this idea of adaptive or AQ is something that is under discussed, underbuilt, underutilized. And as we look ahead to an integrated AI world, that adaptability, that ability to learn and unlearn, that ability to be resilient, to be able to problem solve through change, that is going to be, I would say, our number one skill set as we move into an AI world. And I think the human intelligence movement, has identified that as a pillar, as an area of focus. And I think our schools especially need to be thinking about how do we bring those adaptability competencies into a learner's day-to-day experience at school.
I think those adaptability things that you mentioned not just help with moving forward with AI, but just in everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Like the ability to feel like you can take a risk, come up with a new idea, take a risk and try it, and be okay if it fails. I think so often, and we could, as educators, we could trace back why kids are a little bit afraid to fail and try new things. We've got an entire system built around standardized assessment and grades, and this fear of if I don't get it right, if I don't have the right answer, I won't get the right grade or get the right score. And then we've got everything tied to those scores, or that GPA is what gets you into a good college, because we still believe this idea that when you get good grades, you go to college, then you will get a good job. And that is just not that. We've got to start undoing that narrative for society and also for our kids as well.
I think the majority of teachers, at least ones that I work with, would be like right on board with you as far as issues with standardized assessment. And I see that getting back to what the creativity that you were mentioning earlier, because you can show so much with technology, like so much more, or in addition to, than you can with just traditional forms of assessment. And with technology too, you can kind of adapt the assessment for each learner. So maybe a student finds writing challenging, but they can't explain a concept in a video or whatever. That would be like a basic example. What I'm wondering is what could meaningful assessment look like to you, and if you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, Sean, I think that's so key that that is, like, to me, the linchpin of change that needs to happen is changing what assessment looks like, because we teach every day to the assessment at the end of the unit or the end of the quarter. And so what I would say is, first and foremost, really thinking about assessment for learning instead of assessment of learning. So how do we create assessment throughout the learning process versus this end of unit assessment? And so it becomes more about assessing the thinking, the metacognition that happened along the way, and assessing what kids are as we move out of this knowledge era. We don't need to be assessing what they know, but it's more about how you use what you know. And so how do we start to think differently about those measures of success? I also think what is missing when we think about human intelligence and those three competencies, the AQ, EQ, we do not have measures for that. All of our measures are around IQ. And so we need to bring in human skills measures. How do we ensure as a system, an education system, we are really preparing kids for a world of AI, it means that they have their human intelligences, their human skills, and we don't measure that. We might ask kids about how are they feeling? Like our SEL assessments are what is your pulse check? How are you feeling? All of that's really important. I don't want to minimize that, but we're not really assessing, can kids work in a team? Can they communicate with others? Do they have resiliency? And so I think that is our time right now, is to figure out, how do we measure these durable soft skills, human intelligences, and then as a system put some accountability on ourselves around making sure kids learn those skills. And so I think the classroom assessments change, but also what teachers are expected to really report on and measure needs to shift as well.
So on that note, I'm a fervent hater of report cards. For multiple reasons, but for many years, I've watched educators pour heart and soul into those documents for weeks leading up to their being folded up in envelopes.
Yeah.
And very little return on the investment. It's in an age where people are logging on to see their Dunkin' Donuts account. In the minute, we wait 2 times a year to tell people how their students are doing. It just, none of it makes sense to me. And in Vermont, there are some systems of reporting that have been under the works for a long time around proficiencies and transferable skills, all kind of speaking to what you're talking about, but not really practically getting off the ground much. You mentioned policy advocacy and things like that. How do we take this moment where I think you're absolutely right? We have this opportunity to kind of leverage the importance of the human element in all of this. How do we kind of smartly target the right work? Because I think there's going to be a bunch of people heading off in different directions with this that may or may not be productive. But how do we leverage this moment to really emphasize across policy and systems and in education the human element over what you were talking about before of just pushing that tech?
Yeah. I that is the wicked problem to solve, right? And my mind goes first to really getting beyond the school community involved in the conversation. I think when I talk to educators, they're like, of course, everything you're saying is what we've been saying for years. And then you go to like principals or superintendents, and they also are on board, but they are given these mandates from legislation to fulfill. And so I think it takes a broader community conversation. What I'm getting at is the school system. It feels a little bit like a think tank that just is an echo chamber where we keep saying the same things, but no change happens. So what we're at the human intelligence movement, we're thinking beyond just the education system. How do we get industry? How do we get workforce? What would it look like if big businesses were like, our people are underprepared. We are having to upskill them and put resources into upskilling our employees and starting to demand that kids come more prepared, or I should say young adults come more prepared for the workforce. What would that look like if we started to break down silos and really look at how holistically we're all responsible for what humanity becomes? And so it's no longer schools doing their part, workforce is doing their part, but as an entire society, we are focused on, we've got to really wake up and see what's happening before artificial intelligence starts. The world becomes so focused on artificial intelligence, it takes over. And that sounds sort of fear tactic-y, but I think there's some reality there that we are going to get left behind if we don't figure out as a society what it means to really elevate these human intelligences. And so I think the answer is really comes into a broader community, a broader societal conversation. And I hear pockets of it. I hear in big tech, some, Sam Altman talking about the need for humans at the center and the need for human intelligence. But my question is, what is he doing to further that as a society and build those human intelligences at the same time that he's building artificial intelligences?
I think, Michelle, you talked about fear. I think too, what you're speaking to is it's hard to get this change to happen because of fear. I think education in general gets very comfortable. We've been doing the same thing for a long, long time. And I think it's two things. I think it's fear. And I think it's also, I still don't think we've convinced a lot of educators yet that this is not just another ed tech product. Mm-hmm. Because, they've been coming along, and we're not, I would argue, not using them creatively like we should be, a lot more consumption. And I feel like I teach at the high school level, and I feel like a lot of my teachers just think that, I guess I'll just have to get on board because this is just here now, and this is just another ed tech thing. And, I try to keep having that conversation with them that it's not about the technology. It's about human connection. It's about talking to your students about how this is impacting their life. And so what advice would you give to a leader that is trying to, quell the fears of educators?
Yeah. Well, I first and foremost, I would advise them to start with human intelligence. And so I was with educators this week in California, and all district leaders across LA County area. So we focused a lot on human-centered leadership. What does it mean to really lead with a focus on building these human skills and having professional development that teachers think differently about what teaching and learning and assessment look like, keeping the human, elevating that human. And never once did we pull up an AI tool and say, here's the 5 steps on how to use AI. And here's all the safety that you need to think about and regulation that with AI. That stuff is important. I again don't want to minimize that regulation and safety precautions on AI is not important, but I do worry that our AI literacy is more about how we've always done things with how to use the tool, how do we get around cheating with AI, all of those things that are not what we need to be focusing on. So instead, start with how do we build human skills, start to build curiosity around AI and how AI can help you amplify human potential, and then get educators curious for them to go try and see how AI does bring in higher order thinking skills. How does AI help organize thinking? How could I give students an output and ask them to analyze what AI has done and find the discrepancies in it? Like, just begin to spark their curiosity versus here's everything you need to know about AI. Because as educators, you'll go figure out how to use it once you have a really strong purpose around how to build human intelligence, how to build human skills versus the purpose being, here's how I use this new tool. So it's a very different approach to bringing something into a system. We have limited time for professional development. So it's being smart about how do we use that time to really get our goals met. And I don't believe it is the top 5 AI tools and how do you use them. It becomes building some curiosity and then letting people go, because once you're curious, you'll go explore on your own. You'll go figure out how you might use something.
I had an incident the other day, and I want to talk about it. So I was in the parking lot of one of our schools. I won't disclose which one. And one of the teachers pulled up in an F-350 truck. Lifted kit, all this stuff. And the teacher got out and immediately started talking to me about the environmental impacts of AI. And I got engaged in this conversation. And what I realized is happening is that, yes, there are some real concerns. right? That's a real thing. And there are broader concerns about the environment that we're still not addressing. And so what's happening is because AI is front and center, it's becoming the poster child for different issues in humanity that already exist and we're not addressing well at all. And I'm kind of connecting it to what you're saying about, it's not just about showing the top 5 AI tools. This is about a human conversation on many different levels across different domains. And I'm just curious, what kind of, I imagine there has to be some wins for you and your organization in terms of gaining ground and gaining understanding amongst people, but there's also got to be some frustration in kind of the messaging being lost and going back to that AI focus or this. How are you working to really keep that human part centered in your work?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it just is, I always lead with the human connection, like lead with really tapping into what makes us human. And when in my own personal use of AI, I'm constantly thinking about what untapped intelligence did I just use? How did it make me increase my potential? And then thinking about how to share that. I think I watch in the organization where people do get excited about new tech tools, and it's fun to and I get caught into that. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it does that. That is so amazing. You could do this and this and this. And then I think, for the purpose of what? If we don't know for the purpose of what to begin with, we can get caught up in kind of the flashy, shiny new tools. So I think it's helping people stay grounded in the so what, like, why does this matter? And just kind of continuing to take us back to that. In our organization, I think something that's really important, and I've heard from many people, is the need for human connection. And while we're a worldwide organization, we don't have in-person events yet, but we have a lot of virtual events. We have an online community. And people have told me they just feel seen and heard and feel a human connection in the human intelligence movement. And I think some of that is just our approach to really be connected with people and focus in on who they are and what strengths they can bring and what talents they have, first and foremost.
And I'm sure that for educators, at least, I work in K-8, and for them to have someone putting the human aspect of it front and center would be a relief, and would be, it would attract them to the idea a lot more than, look at this post on 16 ways you can use 11 Labs,
Mm-hmm.
To clone a voice. But what I'm also with Mike's story there, someone getting out of the F-350 and then worrying about the environment. Sometimes I feel like people will latch on to something they've heard, but they're just uncomfortable with it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the environment, I can use that. And I'm not saying this is like a conscious thing this person was doing or other people, but, and for teachers, a lot of the time they'll be, AI is, I care about my students. I care about people. And so, artificial intelligence is this weird, like idea that, sounds like I'm putting kids on a computer and having them write essays with it. I think that there is that narrative that some teachers or people will use. And so it sounds like what you would promote is for people like me in my job, where I'm a tech integrationist. So I help teachers use, technology. Like, what you would advise me to start with, some kind of human approach. What could I say? Basically, is what advice would you have for me?
What I would think about is really being grounded in why do they want to use a certain tool. And you probably already do that as an ed tech integrationist, because I can remember in myself, I would use a lot of technology when technology was first coming out, and I didn't really know why I was doing it and what the purpose was, but it was super cool and super fun. And my gosh, the kids loved it. So it's like really grounding in the educational purpose of it. But then I think, maybe there's 3 things you look for, that they're looking for. How does doing this build human connection? Because human connection, then we can collaborate, we work as teams, we communicate. So in what ways are you helping to build a human to human connection? Maybe a second one is, where are you using higher order thinking skills? So getting, if we just even use Bloom's, getting out of that bottom rungs into the higher thinking, and how can the use of this tool help promote and foster that higher thinking? And maybe a third is, where is curiosity coming in? New ideas and new thinking. I think that idea of curiosity is also a very untapped, underutilized skill. So you could come up with those, just off the kind of the top of my head, 3 sort of questions that people ask, or checkpoints, as they are using new technologies that center the human and really get to the purpose of what and why they're using the tool.
Yeah, that really speaks to me, because one of the things that makes me really sad as far as like tech integration is when people are using like whatever, and I'm not even just talking about my district, I'm talking about in general, like iReady or iExcel or all these programs which serve have a definite purpose and can be helpful. But when I see kids on those for like 20 minutes or more, like many days a week, like I don't like that, and that does not feel human centered at all. And so I really appreciate your message there on that.
Wouldn't it be great to, I think I agree with you. And I think we put kids, whether it's behind apps to practice skill and drill, where basically they replace a worksheet, but it's on the iPad, or we're using a benchmark type assessment to assess skills constantly, which I think is valuable data. So again, that's important. But what I hear you saying, Sean, is a balance, because wouldn't it be great if you saw kids working in a team, using their device, and they're interacting, they're talking more, they're looking at each other more than they are their iPad. But of course, the tool is there to support them, because if they're creating something, they're using the tool to get information, but then they're using that information in a human way. And that replicates what we do in our day-to-day jobs, way more than sitting behind a screen just consuming information.
Michelle, I have to thank you not only for bringing us this learning, and we're going to be watching this carefully, because that human element, that's kind of what Vermont wants to be about, our state and our system. So that's exciting. But also, you've done something that no other guest has done. You got Sean to talk about his feelings, and
I had a hard time. I was like, "What?"
Yeah,
I'm sad.
I want to acknowledge this moment. This is a pivotal moment after many episodes. You've accomplished something. You brought the human out of Sean.
Oh, that's so touching.
So great job. And Sean, as long as we're on this run, after we're done here, I've got some advice for you too.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well, I will say I also feel happy that part of what you have said today is like to really try to stand up and like take some agency here, and not let just like ed tech companies make a product and when they don't know, what it's like in a school necessarily. So, I would like to share that message too. Let's take control of this situation a little bit for ourselves and for our kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Did you hear that, Renee? He said he was happy.
I did hear that.
Great, Michelle. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. This is great. This is awesome. We are definitely going to be pulling on your resources quite a bit as we go forward in this.
Fantastic. And I just encourage all of you listening to join the human intelligence movement. We need people coming around to rally for this message, help us solve this problem. And really, I like what you said, Sean, really have agency to make a difference and make change. And so if you're looking for a place to do that, the human intelligence movement is welcoming you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jill.